Should you refinance your mortgage right now? Mortgage interest rates are almost at all-time lows, but did you know that even if you're lowering your rate dramatically, you could still be making a huge mistake by refinancing? What's up, guys? It's James Allen, the out-of-state investor, and in today's video, I'm going to break down whether or not now is a good time to take advantage of refinancing your mortgage, or if you're making a big mistake. It might seem as simple as just choosing to refinance when you can get that lower interest rate, or maybe your house value has gone up, but I promise you there is so much more to it than that. And if that's the way you're currently making your decisions, then you might be leaving a lot of money on the table and you could be slowing down your wealth building. So today I'm going to touch on a few different ways that you can truly know if you're making the right or wrong decision when it comes to refinancing your home, including some information that is definitely going to surprise you. So you won't want to miss out on this one. But before I break this down, go ahead and smash that like button. And if this is your first time visiting my channel, I'm a real estate investor. I regularly invest in real estate outside of my state, and I build wealth by buying rentals and flipping homes. I love making videos on YouTube showing people how they can do the same, along with how they can become more savvy with their personal financial situation. So if any of that sounds interesting to you, then definitely subscribe and hit the notification bell to be up to date with the latest on this channel. And with that said, let's get started. All right, so when you think of refinancing, what are the most popular reasons you might want to do it? Well, you normally might think about either lowering your interest rate, or maybe even being able to pull out cash out of your equity, or maybe even both. Now, there's not necessarily anything bad about lowering your interest rate or pulling cash out of your built-in equity, but there are some things that you really need to consider before you pull the trigger on a refinance. The first thing I want to bring up is just how important it is to consider where you are on your mortgage payments. If you're familiar at all with how mortgages typically work, you pay mostly interest in the beginning of your payments, and then as you get further along, you start to pay more and more principal down. Okay, so maybe you already knew that, but here's a few facts that maybe you aren't aware of. Let's say you had a 4.5% interest rate on a 30-year fixed term. Well, on average, over the span of the first 7 years of mortgage payments, about 70% of your housing payments goes purely towards interest. So essentially, you're barely building any equity during that time. Secondly, did you know that with those same terms, you would pay 66% of your mortgage balance in the last 15 years. And on top of that, you'd pay 50% of your mortgage balance in the last 10.5 years. So you can see that the way these mortgages work is you're really paying for the bulk of this loan in the second half of your mortgage. Now, the reason I'm telling you this is because if you're already in the second half of your loan, or maybe you're close to it, then even if you save money with your interest rate, you might still end up paying more. Now, that might sound a little bit confusing, but I'm going to show you an example of how it could be the wrong move to get a lower interest rate. So for this example, let's assume you're 15 years in on your mortgage payments. You currently have a 5% interest rate on your mortgage of 30 years, and rates are now going for 3.5%. Let's pretend your lender is contacting you explaining how you're going to save a lot of money by lowering your interest rate. We'll assume this loan is for $400,000, and we're not going to take any cash out for this example, for the sake of an apples to apples comparison. So the main thing your lender is going to tell you is how your monthly payment in this situation will go down from $2,147 a month down to $1,796 a month. He's explaining that you're going to end up saving $351 a month, which is over $4,200 saved every year. Sounds pretty enticing, right? Well, the reality is that you're not accounting for the lack of principal you're going to be paying down since you're resetting the clock on your mortgage. So let me show you an example of two different people to illustrate exactly what I'm talking about. The person who chose to refinance, let's call him Robert the refinancer. Robert at this point has now locked in his low interest rate of 3.5%, and over the next 5 years saves a total of just over $21,000 for lowering his monthly payments. At the same time, we have to factor in the closing costs he had to pay in order to get the refinance on his mortgage. So let's assume in total it cost him $6,000 to do that. So in total, Robert ended up saving just over $15,000 in 5 years. Also, over these 5 years, Robert has built up equity from slowly paying down his mortgage, although because he reset the clock, he's now paying mostly interest. Regardless, Robert still pays down a total of over $41,000 of his mortgage balance. This means that in total, over that 5-year period, Robert ended up making $56,279. Pretty good. Now Steve, on the other hand, he likes to stay put. He decided not to refinance and instead keep that high 5% interest rate. So he's currently in year 15 of his mortgage payments, and over the next 5 years, he doesn't save anything because his interest rate is the same as it's always been, and so his monthly payments, they haven't changed. However, he's in the second half of his mortgage, which means that he's paying more principal down at this point. So even though Steve didn't save any money by lowering his monthly payments, he ended up building a total of over $69,000 of equity, which in other words is how much he paid down during that 5-year period. Now that's just early on, so Robert does still have a chance to catch up to Steve. Over a 10-year period, Robert has saved over $42,000 with his lower payments, and we still have to account for the $6,000 of closing costs, putting his total saved at $36,133. In addition to this, he's now built up over $90,000 in equity from paying down his principal. So in total, after 10 years, Robert has made $126,425, which is a solid amount of money. Steve, on the other hand, still hasn't saved anything since his payments are the same, but at the same time, he has managed to pay down his principal a total of over $157,000, which in total is still more than Robert has made at this point. But by year 15, it has to catch up, right? Well, Robert keeps saving his money with his lower payments, and after 15 years, he's saved a total of $63,200. Take away the $6,000 in closing costs, that means he's saved a total of $57,200 in over 15 years. He's also built up equity by paying down his principal balance, a total of over $148,000. So the grand total that Robert ends up making after 15 years was close to $206,000. Steve, on the other hand, still hasn't saved a dime since his mortgage payments are the same. But as far as equity goes, Steve ends up with a total of over $271,000 after 15 years. That's almost 70 grand more than Robert. And on top of all of that, Steve now has no more mortgage payments anymore, whereas Robert still has to pay for 15 more years. So all that considered, Steve definitely wins this competition by a mile. It goes to show that depending on where you're at in your mortgage payments, you may be better off avoiding the refinance. Now, 15 years into your mortgage payments doesn't have to be the cutoff. You may only be 10 years and find it still doesn't make sense to refinance at this point. Understand that lenders are incentivized to get you to refinance your mortgage because that's how they make their money. Refinances really are one of the most misunderstood things in all of real estate, and most people will assume that lowering their interest rate is a good thing. So it's up to you to do your own thinking and problem solving to determine whether or not it really is in your best interest or not. But if you're going to consider a refinance, it's always better to do it as early on as possible. I'm definitely not anti-refinance by any means. I do them on my own properties, but if I'm going to do a refinance, I try to do it when I'm in my first few years of my mortgage payments. The second thing to consider is a new refinance fee that's about to go into effect. Starting December 1st, you're going to have to pay an extra 0.5% of the loan in your closing costs. That might not sound like a lot, but the reality is that on a $400,000 loan, that would come out to an extra $2,000 out of pocket for closing costs. So if you want to avoid this new fee, you really want to start your refinance no later than October 31st so that you have enough time to close the loan before the new law goes into effect in December. The third thing to consider is your credit score. If your credit score is not that great right now, it may be worth taking some time to fix it before you start the refinance. Ideally, you really want to have at least a 740 credit score. That normally gets you the best terms and the best interest rates. And after that, you get penalized every 20 points down. So you'll be penalized for being in the next tier down if your credit score is between a 720 and a 739. And again, if you have a credit score between a 700 and a 719. So it could start to become really costly to do a refinance if your credit score is in the mid to low 600s. So if you're considering refinancing and your credit score is not where it belongs or not up to par, I recommend trying to do what you can to first fix that credit score and then start the refinance process. Now, I don't want this video to only be about why you shouldn't refinance, because there's actually a lot of good reasons to refinance. My favorite reason in the world to refinance is if the value of your house has gone up and you can tap into that equity and pull out that cash and reinvest it into something else, whether it's stocks or real estate or something else, some kind of thing that can pay you back. The more cash is stuck in your house, the slower that money is growing, so it makes more sense, especially when you're young younger to try and take that money out of the house and use that money to make more money by investing. It's called opportunity cost. By keeping that money stuck in your house, that actually costs you the opportunity of making more money with things like investing in real estate or stocks. Now remember that every situation is different, and obviously if you're near the end of a mortgage or you're getting closer to retirement, then it may not make sense for your situation. Another great reason to refinance is if you're stuck in an adjustable rate mortgage. Maybe you're in a 5/1 ARM type of mortgage where after 5 years, it becomes an adjustable rate that moves with the market. Well, if you plan on staying in that house for a while, that could be a great opportunity to refinance into a 15-year fixed rate or a 30-year fixed rate to make your payments more predictable. So overall, do I think that now is a great time to refinance? Well, I think that the answer is yes for a lot of people. You see, the fact is interest rates are really low right now. Home values have gone up dramatically over the last 9 years. So if you're early in on your loan and you're making significant improvement on your rate, then go for it. If you can also tap into a bunch of equity because your home value's gone up, then absolutely go for it. But if you're more than halfway done paying your mortgage, then you may want to run the numbers to determine your own situation and see if it makes sense for you. Overall, I think that refinancing your home can be a great tool to build massive wealth, especially when you reinvest that money back into investments that pay you. But with that said, hopefully you saw today that it's not just as straightforward as getting a lower interest rate, or maybe if you can pull cash out of the house. There's a lot of moving parts, and unfortunately most lenders, they're not going to be willing to put in the time to walk you through all these different moving parts, so you have to take responsibility for your own decisions when it comes to deciding on a refinance. All that said, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Let me know if you liked it in the comments below, and also if you felt like today's video added some value to you, then go ahead and smash that like button and subscribe to the channel for more videos like this. Lastly, follow me on Instagram at The Out of State Investor. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.